why do we have low self-worth? Like, why is it so human to go back to that sort of shrinking and this dimming of our radiance, this covering up of everything that's amazing about us?
You're watching Developing Potential with Diana Keuilian.
Hi, friend. Welcome back. Today, we're talking about self-worth. And really, the question that we're answering is, how can I improve my self-worth? And I really toyed with naming this episode, You Are Amazing, because that's really the message that I want to give you today and really remind you of how amazing you are. And it's so easy to get down on ourselves. It's such a human thing to feel bad about ourselves, our capabilities, about who we are, and to really just judge ourselves harshly. And there's so much of that happens. You know, we see so much of that where people feel bad about themselves. And so I was like, I want to put out this episode just to have us be reminded of how amazing you are and all of the reasons that you have to feel good about yourself. So when we have good, high self-worth, we know that we're capable of love, we're deserving of love, we're deserving of respect. And when we have this high self-worth, it impacts the rest of our life. When we have high self-worth, we feel confident, we have high self-esteem, we have this knowledge and ability to connect with other people. And it's like it opens us up to the world, right? It gives color to our life. And then the opposite of that, when we start to feel down on ourselves and we feel this lowered self-esteem, we kind of like close ourselves off and we make ourselves smaller. And maybe you think, I'm not worthy of being loved, or I don't deserve love, or I'm not as good as other people. And when this happens, our confidence goes away, our self-esteem gets lowered, and it's just a closing off and a shrinking of ourselves versus this just opening and this growing. And I like to talk about our radiance. And this is kind of an abstract concept, but just really this feeling and this knowledge that we all have this glowing radiance inside of us. And our job here on earth is to uncover our radiance so that we can have it shine, and then that we can do the same for others. We can be this positive influence in other people's lives where we can help them uncover their radiance. We can acknowledge their radiance. And so I want to do that for you today, is really acknowledge your radiance so that you can feel connected to it and you can open up and live this bigger life that you were meant to live. So why do we have low self-worth? Like, why is it so human to go back to that sort of shrinking and this dimming of our radiance, this covering up of everything that's amazing about us? And I think there's a lot of reasons that this happens. I think the first one, especially these days, is comparison, right? We have social media where we can just compare ourselves to so many people and really compare ourselves to these, airbrushed, like posed, all of these like fake images. But the impact on our self-worth it's lowering. It's a diminishing of our self-worth when we compare ourselves to other people. And I do this in my own life. I have just started this podcast and I'm growing it and I'm, starting to figure myself out in this world. And my husband is like crushing it with his podcast. And if I ever look at his audience and look at what he's doing, my instinct is to just feel like I'm less important and to feel that my self-worth just starts to shrink because I'm comparing myself to somebody who's been working at a craft for more than 10 years, something that I just started. And I think that's part of comparison, is that we compare ourselves to people that it's not a direct comparison. Like the playing field is not even when you compare yourself to someone else. Your situation is different than theirs, right? But we always tend to do that to people who are doing better than us so that it makes us feel smaller. I think another reason that we can kind of get into this trap of feeling bad about ourselves is cognitive distortions. And we've talked about this in previous episodes about, just the ways that we start to overgeneralize, or maybe we have a negativity bias where we only pick up on negative things that people say about us, and we kind of like brush the positive things aside. We don't really pay attention to those. We can have this, the spotlight effect where we feel like everybody looks at our flaws and everybody's thinking about us. And then catastrophizing, right? Something goes wrong or you make a mistake and just drawing the conclusion that it's the end of the world. So these cognitive distortions are a way for us to really kind of feel bad about ourselves. And then another thing, and this is such a human experience, is personalizing negative events and experiences in our life. And this is something that happens, most of the time when we're really young. Things can happen, whatever it is. And we've also talked about this previously, where we like to make meaning out of things that happen. So traumatic things happen and we turn it inward and we try to take responsibility for it as a way of feeling that we have control. But the result is a negative self-belief. And a negative self-belief that I've been working on lately with an EMDR therapist is I'm not important. So in my formative years, a messaging that came across to me was, hey, you're not important. And so this negative cognition has lived in my limbic system, and it's something that has impacted my self-worth. And we all have negative cognitions. We all have experiences in our life that give us messages. Like we take a message from it, and it's not a true message. It's just something that our brains did to make us feel like it was our fault. Because if it's our fault, then maybe we have some power. So these are all reasons why it's so normal to feel bad about ourselves from time to time, and to come to a place where you feel that you have low self-worth. So there's nothing wrong with you if you're like, yeah, I don't feel that good about myself all the time. Like that's such a normal human thing. And so I wanted to share these 3 universal truths about humans. And so you're a human, I'm a human. These are 3 things that we can hold on to and we can start to really build our self-worth on. And so the first one is that we're miracles. And what I mean by that is there's a 1 in 400 trillion chance that you were born. And like, let that number sink in. And I don't know if you've ever spent time thinking about this, but the chances that you were created and that you were born into this world to be here, to sit here and think that, I don't feel good about myself. 1 in 400 trillion. And this is a number that scientists have come up with. And the way they did that is they did a bunch of math and they said there was a 1 in 20,000 chance that your parents would ever meet. And then from there was a 1 in 2,000 chance that your parents would end up having kids together. And then once they did have kids, there was a 1 in 400 quadrillion chance that you specifically would be the result of that sperm and that egg. And so when you sit there and think like, it is a miracle, you had a better chance of winning the lottery because I think that's like a 1 in $300 million chance. So you had a 1 in 400 trillion chance of being born. And when you just contemplate that, it's hard not to feel kind of special. Like it's hard not to feel kind of like a big deal that here we are, right? In addition to that, we are one of a kind. And so every single person on this earth is unique, right? So 0.1% of our genes are unique. And that doesn't sound like a lot. Like there's 99.9% of all humans is the same. But that 0.1% is like 300 million base pairs of our DNA, which is a big variance. And that's just scientifically like our cells. But when it comes to how we actually are in the world and what we're interested in, what our personality is like all of these different things that make us so unique. And this kind of goes back to how we will compare ourselves to others and feel bad about ourselves. But then when you look at it and you're like, hey, like it's a miracle that I'm here. And it's another miracle that there's nobody else on this earth that's exactly like me. Like I'm like a snowflake. So when you start to think about these things, it's hard not to start feeling a little bit excited about yourself. So this third universal truth about humans is that we are resilient. When you think about how much change that we encounter in our life, I mean, from being born, being a baby, growing, going through adolescence, becoming an adult, all of the environmental changes that happen around us, all of the changes that happen to ourselves and our body. Like you look in the mirror at 40 and you're a fully different person than you were when you were younger. You sound different, you think different. Like we're in this constant state of change and evolution, and we're adapting to all of it. Right? And that's a miracle in and of itself. The fact that you're able to continuously like roll with the punches of life and to just continue to grow and adapt and change. It's a miracle. So these three things, you're a miracle that you're even here, you're one of a kind, and you're resilient. Like that should be just this base of like feeling some sense of self-worth. Like, wow, like I'm kind of amazing, right? Almost like seeing a unicorn. Like this is crazy. I'm starting to just feel and connect with this radiance, the radiance of being human, starting to uncover it a little bit. Okay, so how do we go from here in really building upon this to build our self-worth? And what do we reach for on those days when we're just feeling like we're not cutting it and everybody around us is doing better? What I like to do is to lean into self-determination theory. And we've talked about this in a previous episode about utilizing the three human needs in relationship. So to help foster these three needs in our partner. And so today I'm going to talk about fostering these three needs in ourselves to really start to feel our intrinsic value and start to connect with this feeling that we are deserving of love. And so those three needs are, first we have autonomy and ownership, and then we have competence, and thirdly we have connection. So that first one of autonomy and ownership, and this is really diving into who you are, like what are your personal values and how are you acting on them? How are you taking ownership in your life to live your personal values? And this, this goes into getting to know yourself. Like, what are your needs? What are your wants and your interests? And really, what are you passionate about? And then taking ownership on these things. And then the second thing, competence. And we can have competence in so many things in our lives, and you do. Like if you sit and start to think about how many things you do well in your life and where you have competency, you start to really get this sense of value and this sense of respect for yourself. And so looking at your talents, right? Like what are your talents? And don't tell me you don't have any, because you do have talents. We all have talents. Like what are your abilities? What are your skills? And so spending some time really thinking about these things and noticing them. Because going back to our tendency, that negativity bias, our tendency to focus on what's wrong with ourselves, really forcing yourself to look at like what's going well, what do I do competently, and then doing more of that. And so the third one is connection. And so even when we put ourselves in a place where we're isolated and we don't feel really connected to others, if you look for it, you can find connection in your life. Like there are people who matter to you. There are people who you are hugely important in their life, and leaning into those connections. And then also opening ourselves to find more connection in our life, right? Like when we bring two humans together and we each have our own radiance, like you bring it together and it's like brighter. There's this power in connecting with other people. And so really leaning into these three things, your autonomy, Like, who are you? What matters to you? What decisions are you making for yourself? Your competence, like, what are you good at? What do you want to get better at, right? Like, what do you feel good when you're doing it? And then this connection, like, who are you connected to? And how can you become connected deeper to those people and then connected to more people? So if you're looking for a place to start applying this, because, maybe none of these resonated with you, depending on where you are with how you're feeling about yourself right in this moment. If you're like, I can't think of anything about myself that I don't have any autonomy and I don't feel competent in anything and I don't feel like I have any good connections. If you're sitting there feeling like that, then my suggestion would be to start with your body. And I love this whole concept of just start with your body. If you need to build yourself up, start with your body. And so take ownership, and that's the first one, right? Having that autonomy. Take ownership of starting some kind of physical activity, whatever that might be for you. Maybe it's starting to go on walks a few times a week. Maybe it's going to the gym. Maybe it's biking. Maybe it's lifting weights. That's a really great one, building some of that lean muscle. But take ownership over a physical activity, and then you're going to do it for long enough to where you start to feel competent at it. Now, maybe it's something you've done in the past, so maybe you'll get that competency quicker, but maybe it's even something new, and you're going to stick with it. You're going to take ownership of this. You're going to stick with it until you start to feel some competence in it. And then third, you're going to bring in connection. And I feel like physical activity is such a great avenue for connecting with other people. You can go to a gym where there's other people. You can take an exercise class or go to a boot camp, find a friend or a neighbor who's going to walk with you a few times a week, or go on bike rides with your family. So find connection and bring that into this physical activity that you've taken ownership of and you're gaining competence in. And this is really just to get the ball rolling for you, because from here it's just going to snowball. And you're going to find other areas of your life where you're going to be taking ownership and having this autonomy. You're going to just be thriving and finding competence in other areas of your life, and then building more connections. And when we feel autonomy, when we feel competent, and when we're connected, our self-worth is higher, right? It's impossible to feel small and unworthy when we have these three things going for us. So I hope that you got something out of that. I do have extra credit for you, and this is, a really powerful one. It sounds very simple, but your extra credit is to tell yourself on a daily basis, I am worthy of love. And it's such a powerful concept, and it's true. And if you have to go back and remind yourself that you're a miracle, 1 in 400 trillion chance that you're even on this earth, you're one of a kind, and you're resilient. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe, share this with a friend who's feeling down, who needs to be reminded that they're amazing. So you are amazing. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back next week.
Thanks for watching Developing Potential with Diana Keuilian.